Hi everyone, this is Rebecca Rohan from the Yes Prep West campus, and in this video I'm basically just going to talk through some of the resources that I've created for our pre-calculus end of year project and kind of just give you an overview of what I was thinking when I made the project and all of the resources that are created for you to use and kind of how to use them, where to find them, all that sort of good stuff. So to start off with, let's start with kind of where all your resources are going to be located. So if you go to our pre-calculus team site and you go down to our last unit, Unit 11, inside Unit 11, as you see here, there's a folder that's called the End of Year Project. So just click on that, and that's basically where all the documents that I've created are going to live for this End of Year project. There we go. So this first document, if you take a look, is called the teacher-facing instructions. This is probably, we put it as the first document because it's probably going to be the first place that you're going to want to start and is going to give you all of the information about the overview of how the project should look and my notes and my thoughts and what topics in pre-calculus each kind of day of the project is aligned to. All of those good things are going to be found in there, and I'll go ahead and show you in a little bit more detail in a second. The second document that you'll see is a PowerPoint. It's a student-facing expectations PowerPoint that you can show at the beginning of the project, and you'll see that in my instructions for day one. Then we have the third document is what I'm calling my data package, and I'll explain what that means kind of when I explain a little bit more about the project, but you're going to need that for all of your groups every day. And then documents 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are day-by-day handouts that you can use with your students to kind of walk them through the process of the project. This includes due first and exit tickets, and then their kind of questions and guided notes for the day. The ninth document is a scoring rubric that you could use as kind of a guide to how to grade students throughout the week on this. And I'd say majority of the grading is not tons of grading every day. When we walk through that, I'll kind of show you when and how you might want to grade things. And then finally, right now you can only see the key for one of the cities, and that'll make sense in a little bit when I explain what the project's about. But once I get back to campus and I scan in the rest of them, then after document 9, all the rest of the documents will really just be keys, PDF keys of all of the handouts, so that if you have any questions about kind of the math or want to check your work or your students' work, you can use my keys as a resource for that. Unfortunately, I have not done this project. We created this project this year, and I have not done it with my students, and I won't do it with them until the end of this semester. So I don't have any sort of like student examples or anything like that. So the keys are going to be kind of as good as it gets for now, and hopefully we'll learn a lot from this project and be able to modify and change things. I'm sure there's going to be things that need to be changed for future years. So I'll appreciate that feedback for sure, and then hopefully we can get some cool student samples to include for next year. Okay, so let's go ahead and start diving on in a little bit to what my vision was for the project and what the project is about. Just to give you some background, I really was trying to incorporate not just one pre-calculus skill or unit, but trying to cover a large portion of some of the significant topics of pre-calculus that stick out in my mind from throughout the year, and how we can kind of tie those all together into a project and assess the students on their progress with those topics. So what I ended up landing on is what I'm calling the city project, and I'm going to pull up the first document, the teacher facing overview. So I'm calling this project the City Project, and like it says right here, we're going to apply what we know to the world around us. We're going to pick a city from the list below and work with your group to discover the math behind the population, weather patterns, gas prices, and more. Become an expert on your city and share your findings with the class over the course of 5 class days. So essentially the students are going to be picking, or you can be assigning or whatever in their groups, a city from this list, and throughout the course of the days they're going to be kind of looking at different pre-calculus skills we've used to analyze the population, weather, gas, and other sort of city characteristics, as I'm calling it. And then you'll see right here, day 1, day 2, day 3 are a lot of that analysis over different characteristics of their city and doing a lot of the mathematics, the pre-cal behind what's going on. And then day 4, they're going to be putting everything together and kind of going back through their work and displaying their findings and creating a group poster. So that's going to be really where they're putting things together and creating something to share their final thoughts and conclusions from the math on day 1, day 2, and day 3. And then that poster needs to be done and ready to go on day 4, because day 5 is going to be a gallery walk where your students can give each other feedback and look at the other posters from the other cities. And then the end is basically going to be reflecting on everything from the gallery walk and the feedback from other groups and all of that. So kind of think of it as introduction on day 1, and then starting some analysis, day 2 analysis, day 3 analysis, day 4 creating the poster, and day 5 doing a gallery walk and discussing and wrapping up the project. Okay, so all you should really need for this, like you'll see here, are the handouts. I created something that I mentioned earlier, the third document, which is called the data package, and that looks like this. And it basically just has for each city the data that that group would need to be able to complete the guided questions and activities that they're doing in the handout. So we've got population data, temperature data, gas price function, and some things like that. So as you scroll through, you'll see that there's one for every city in the list. So you do need to have your kids pick not just a random city, but a city from this list, so that you can reference that data package and give that to them so that they have their data for all of their analysis. Then they'll definitely need their calculators, just like they have all year. And then once you get to day 4 and day 5, they're going to need posters. It probably would be a good idea to provide some graph paper so that they can transfer their graphs from their analysis and can put it on their poster, but it will be a little bit easier to graph than by hand on the poster, and probably some markers and things like that. But other than those things, you shouldn't need to do a lot in terms of materials for this project. Okay, so day 1, you'll see right here on the teacher facing, you can read all this in detail, but I've got a lot of details about kind of like what objectives, key points, and things like that you'll need. I think one of the key sections is going to be this how, which kind of runs through the timing of how I see the flow of class going. So for day 1, showing a PowerPoint to introduce the project, and I'll show you that in a second. Assigning the teams and groups and cities, giving them the data package, and then jumping into that first day of analysis, and then your exit ticket. Day 2, they're going to be focusing more on like temperature data primarily, and that'll be good because it'll be able to tie in a lot of stuff from like our trig and sinusoidal units and things like that. So we're going to be, again, key points, blah, 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 and then how I'll kind of run you through that day. Day 3, we're going to be talking about change in gas prices over time in your city, and talking a lot about polynomials that day. And then day 4, like I said, putting it all together. Here's some instructions for how you should probably structure that time, since day 4 is a lot of just work time for the kids. I definitely want to set some expectations on how you should use that time. So read through that for some details there. On day 5, that's the gallery walk. Again, I have just some expectations on some thoughts of what that could look like in the classroom, what you should be doing, what the students should be doing, and all of that good stuff. So read through this in detail. I know I went through it pretty fast, but I wanted to give you an overview, and hopefully it'll give you a better kind of like picture day by day of what's happening. I already talked through a little bit with the data package. I'll give you just an example of what a handout could look like for on a day. So this is day 2, for example, Like I mentioned earlier, I included a due first and an exit ticket that's aligned to what the students are going to be working on that day, which I think is a really helpful tool and to use in class, because some of the students might need it almost as a mini lesson when you're reviewing the due first, to set them up for success with that day. If it's been a while since you've looked at those types of problems and you feel like your students, it was something they struggled with, you might want to take some time to definitely go over that. And then the exit ticket is going to be a way to kind of assess, once the students worked with their group, what did they take away from the day, and are they able to, in this example, like graph a sinusoidal function and identify the characteristics, right? So you got due first, exit ticket, and then after that we'll jump straight into the guided questions, and I put in some kind of like key points in review for them to reference for the day. And as they go through, the entire time they're going to need to be pulling data from their data package as needed for their particular city. So their group and the group next to them, their answers definitely will not look the same, because they're going to be working on probably 2 different cities. Okay, so that's what a handout looks like, and you can jump on into those. Day 4 and day 5 look a little bit different, because again, they're not the analysis days, they're more making the poster. But like I mentioned before, I did provide some structure, so you'll see on day 4 I have a place for them to plan their poster before they just jump in, and hopefully that can kind of control their timing so that they don't run out of time. And then on day 5, where's day 5? There we go. On day 5, on the back here, it's got their reflection questions and things like that. So there still is a handout for those days, even though there's not really as much of the pre-calculus analysis going on those days. Okay, so those are the handouts. Hopefully you're still with me. Talking a lot. Okay, and then we also have, I mentioned the rubric. So let me just give you a sneak peek of that. Now, this rubric is just kind of a simple basis for something that I brainstormed for how we could grade the kids on this, and there's definitely some flexibility here, but it's here if you want to use it, and it adds up to a total of 100 points that the kiddos could get on their project. These top criteria are more based on their poster, and were they able to like create an equation and graph for the population data, for the temperature, and for the gas prices. And then there's some flexibility with this last one. Essentially, I gave them the space to come up with 3 other just what I'm calling conclusions based off of their math and analysis from the previous days, to also share on their poster. And they kind of have the freedom there to choose whatever they found as like something interesting mathematically about the city as they analyze things. So these are the things that they need to have, and this they also need to have, but it has some flexibility with what they pick to be their conclusions. Down at the bottom, then other habits and participation you might be interested in grading. I'm going to grade the exit tickets daily, so I won't be grading their entire handout or packet daily, but I'm going to collect those exit tickets and grade them, and they'll be worth 5 points each day. And then their final product, the poster, their individual contribution. There's some instructions of how to kind of hold the kids accountable to making sure one person in the group isn't doing all the work. And so their individual contribution, what they contributed to the poster, will be worth some points. And then finally, making sure that they're giving some thoughtful feedback during the gallery walk. You can hold them accountable to that by making that worth some points. So those are some general thoughts for how you could score the kids on this. And again, hopefully it's not too much of a heavy lift and not a ton of crazy grading. Majority of this will probably come after the project is finished, when you have their posters, but the exit tickets and some of that you could be doing along the way. Okay. I did want to take a look also at the PowerPoint that I mentioned that I provided, that you can use as the student-facing kind of overview to present that to them at the beginning on day 1, and I have that in the plan for day 1. Essentially, it just runs through what the project is, and again, the kind of general calendar that I went over with you. The rubric so that the students kind of know from the beginning where their points are going to be coming from. Then I also put in here some group roles. I think it's super important that from the beginning when you're explaining this project to your students that you go over what it looks like to work in a group so that we don't have one student doing most of the heavy lifting on this and they're all doing a lot of the analysis and thought behind all of the project. And here's some ideas for what you could do as different roles in your group. This has 4 roles, so the math here will kind of depend on the size of your classes. If you notice back at the beginning, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cities. So you could potentially try to do 8 groups in a class if you have a big class. I tried to give enough to where hopefully that covers your class. And then depending on what size that would make your group, hopefully you can use some of these roles and you might need to split a few or kind of manipulate for what works for your classroom. So then some norms to go over, tips for success, and talking through kind of a little bit more in detail the final product of their poster and what that's going to need to look like so that they have that on their radar to make sure that all the math that they're doing on their handouts they're going to need to be referencing later and using to pull from for their poster, and so making sure they're keeping things nice and organized so that they'll have that ready to go for Thursdays. Is going to be primarily the day, if you do it on a Thursday, day 4 I should say, day 4, the day that they end up actually putting the poster together, they can be referencing their handouts from day 1, day 2, day 3. I hope I didn't make that too confusing. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so that is their PowerPoint that you can show. Here is, like I said, just keys that'll show you the math for particular cities. So I think that's San Antonio, and the rest of them will be up there soon. So what have I missed? What are some other things? I probably should have said this at the beginning, my bad, but you'll see that I have planned for 5 days for this project. I wanted to just go ahead and pull up for you the Pre-Calculus Yearly Overview Long-Term Plan document so you can kind of see where this was supposed to fit in. So at the end of Unit 10, Limits and Derivatives, which is this red block that goes into May, we've basically allowed in the calendar 5 days right here, this orangey color from the 13th to the 17th, to be possibly 5 days for this final project. And then following that, there's 5 days that are allowed for our Unit 11 polar curves. So you have some flexibility here in what order you want to do things. There's not a unit exam for Unit 11 polar curves, so the window I think is a little bit more flexible, and Keith might have more information about that if I'm wrong. But what I understand is that kind of in this 2-week time span, you've got time to cover what we're calling Unit 11, which is polar curves and this end of year project. And so I've given you enough resources for hopefully 5 days of class. But again, there is some flexibility there for you to tweak and cut things if you need it to be shorter, or spend some more time with the final product of their poster if you have some extra time. So keep that in mind in terms of the calendar and where you're headed, but hopefully you get to use some of these resources and you find that it's a good way to kind of tie things together for the year and pull back some of those old topics that were on the last 2 common assessments, since we won't have a end of year common assessment. Hopefully this will be a good way to pull back a lot of topics from throughout pre-cal. Like I said at the beginning, my goal was to try to find a way, which was kind of difficult, to take a lot of the different topics we've learned and kind of pull it together with one common theme, which is how I landed on this kind of city project idea. Other than that, so we've got that. We went through the days, the data package. I think that's mainly everything that I would have to share with you guys. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to reach out to me. Again, this is Rebecca Rohan from the SPrep West campus, so you can either post something in Teams or just email me directly, and I'd be happy to kind of help you out with my thoughts on anything. But I hope that it's a lot of fun with your students, and like I mentioned before, I haven't done it live with students, so I'm sure we're going to learn a lot and be able to tweak and kind of fix things for the future. So we love the feedback, and I can't wait to hear how it goes in your classes.